Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Annie, this is Stanley, and we're here to talk about books. So today's video is the next in my Reviews Revisited series, where I pick a book from my reviews catalogue that I read sometime since 2005 and that I don't really remember, and then I reread it, do a deep dive analysis, and then compare my reactions in 2025 to what I thought when I reviewed it originally. And for today's video, we are looking at Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. But first of all, let's make some tea. What do the tea dice have in store today? 11 and 0. 11 white jasmine. This is a favourite of mine at the moment. I've been drinking this quite a lot. I have established that I don't need a strainer for this teapot because the spout is narrow enough that the tea leaves don't come out, so I can go straight into the pot. There we go. Good old past me has already boiled the kettle. This one is a little bit tricky to pour into, but as long as we're careful, it's all good. Look at that. A lot of jasmine in this jasmine tea, which is sometimes not the case. This is a good one. There we go. White jasmine tea. Lovely. So now we've got our tea, let's get into my recollections of having read the book. So I thought this was the only Stephen King fiction book that I had ever read, because I have read his non-fiction book on writing, which I have many thoughts about, but let's not go into that now. But it turns out I lied, because I've also read The Gunslinger, which is the first in the Dark Tower series, but then I didn't carry on with that and had completely forgotten about it. Mr. Mercedes, I know, came onto my radar because the audiobook is narrated by one of my favourite audiobook narrators, Will Patton, who I came across because he read the audio versions of the Raven Chronicles by Maggie Stiefvater, which is one of my favourite book series. And I decided to look for more books read by him and found Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King and thought, why not? Let's give it a go. I know that I was listening to the Raven Boys series on holiday in Swanage with my best friend from university and her family, and I seem to remember her kids were pretty small during that holiday. So I'm thinking it was sometime around 2017, 2018. I probably then went on to discover this book. Anyway, don't really remember anything about it at all. So I'm going to go and listen to the audiobook, and when I've got halfway through, I'm going to come back and let you know my thoughts. So I'm halfway through Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I would not have said that I was a Stephen King girly. I am not a horror reader. Hate horror, hate being scared, never really understood the appeal of being frightened. Wouldn't ever read something like It or, you know, one of the more classic horror books from him. But yeah, I'm surprised at how much I'm enjoying this book. So we start off with a fairly dreary scene, though, of people queuing up very early in the morning for a job fair, and we get a point of view character from one of the people in the queue, and he strikes up a conversation with a young mother who's brought her baby, and it's all looking fairly mundane, fairly boring. And then someone turns up in a Mercedes, as you might guess, and plows into the crowd and kills lots of people and injures even more. So it's an effective, quite shocking start, because we are obviously affected more by the injuries and the deaths because we've got to know a few of the people in the queue. So that's a very effective way to start the book. And then it skips a year and we switch to the perspective of Bill Hodges, who has recently, 6 months previously, retired from the police force, and he was a detective, and he had been the lead detective on the Mercedes killer case and had not managed to solve it. So he's in a fairly stereotypical situation as a retired policeman. He's very bored. He's not sure he wants to really go on living. He's playing around with his father's gun on a daily basis while he's watching afternoon TV. And then he gets a letter in the post which claims to be from the Mercedes killer, taunting him and suggesting that he might actually quite like to go through with his plan with the gun. And that brings Bill Hodges back to life, and he starts investigating the case again. And so, yeah, that's the main thrust of the book. So I quite liked Bill from the start. He's very well observed, as all the characters are in this book. It's one of the main plus points of the book. I like his state of mind as it's presented. It's very realistic. He's obviously very good at certain things, at certain aspects of investigating. He's not so good at others, not very good with computers, but he's very self-aware about it. The book is set in 2010, so it's realistic that a 60-year-old retired detective wouldn't be massively up on technology. But yes, I thought he came across quite well, quite quickly. We also get the killer's perspective, which I hadn't remembered and wasn't expecting, and that evidently adds quite an extra dimension to it. So Brady Hartsfield is the killer. And we get that knowledge fairly early on. So it's not a whodunit so much as it is a how are they going to figure out who it is and hopefully bring him to justice. But who knows? I don't know where it's going yet because I'm only halfway through. What else? I found it quite immersive. As I said, Will Patton is a very good audio narrator and he suits the book very well. Initially, it's quite slow. Not a huge amount happens in the first half, but it does feel as though it's quite pacey and as though it's moving along quite quickly because there are 150 chapters and they're all nearly all under 10 minutes. So it does move along quite quickly, but it feels as though that structure is quite contrived, maybe to add that sense of pace to the book, because quite a lot of the chapters do follow directly on from where the previous one stopped. So there isn't really a reason for there to be a chapter break. But anyway, other characters, my favourite characters are Jerome, the young black teenager. He's 17, who does Bill Hodges' garden and does chores for lots of the fairly wealthy white folks in the neighbourhood and plays into their stereotypes for a black teenager and puts on a persona that is not his own because he is in fact preparing to go to an Ivy League college and hasn't decided yet whether he wants to go to Harvard or Princeton. And I really like him. He is Hodges' computer guy as well, because he's very good with computers, and he gets brought in on the investigation towards the halfway point because Hodges needs some tech help. And there's also Janie Patterson. So she's the sister of the person whose car was used in the crime. And she talks to Hodges about various things that have happened and also ends up kind of being involved because she employs Hodges to look into the case because she thinks the killer had something to do with her sister's death as well. So they're definitely my favourite characters. I'd heard bad things about Stephen King's presentation of and treatment of female characters, but Janie's awesome. I love her. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the romance aspect of the book, but I love how assertive Janie is in bed and out of bed, actually. She's great. So very happy to read more about her. Hope she's going to be in it more in the second half. And yeah, by the halfway point, I was totally in it, because there's something that gets set up shortly before the halfway point, and at the point where I stopped, it was quite tense. I was actually standing in the bathroom listening to it, going, no, 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 out loud to the mirror, because something had been set up, and the circumstances for that event, which I'll come to in the spoiler section, had come about, but it wasn't clear yet whether the deed had actually been done, and I was quite tense. So I am very much looking forward to getting back into it once I've finished filming this section. So I think that's probably all I've got for non-spoiler thoughts. As I said, not a huge amount happens in the first half, but it is very well put together, so I am enjoying it. Okay, so spoiler section, spoilers for the first half of Mr. Mercedes. Jump to where the frame disappears if you don't want spoilers. So yeah, what does actually happen in the first half is you've got the massacre of the people at the job fair queue. You've got Hodges not enjoying his retirement. He gets a letter supposedly from the killer, taunting him, and that kind of brings him back to life, as it were. And he starts investigating. He gets in touch with the car owner's sister and discovers that she also received a letter supposedly from the killer, and that probably prompted her to end her life by suggesting that she was at least partially at fault for allowing the car to be accessed. So yeah, Hodges starts investigating. The killer, Brady, was hoping that he would be able to taunt Hodges into actually ending his life too, because he wants the extra thrill of doing that. But it has the opposite effect, because Hodges gets really excited about getting involved in the investigation. We get some information about Brady's background. It leans in on psychopathic tendencies that turned up for him quite early on. We're told that he killed his younger brother when he was about 10 or 11, and there's also the suggestion that his mother might have been involved in that happening, and his mother's an alcoholic, and they have a wildly inappropriate relationship, which is quite uncomfortable, but deliberately so. And yeah, Hodges is invited by Brady in the letter to connect with him on an online chat room called Under Debbie's Blue Umbrella. And Hodges logs on to that, and he thinks very carefully about what he wants to do and how he wants to interact. And what he does is accuse Brady of confessing falsely and not actually being the killer. And that absolutely enrages Brady. And Brady's reaction to that is to plan to kill Jerome's dog, which I can't remember whether it happens or not, but at the point where I stopped, as I said, the circumstances in which the plan to kill the dog would be carried out have just happened, but it's not clear whether the poisoning of the dog has happened. So I may be in for an upsetting time when I get back to it. But that's where I am. As I said, totally in it. It's very involving, and I am quite keen to find out what happens next. But that's about it, really, for spoilers. So end of the spoiler section. And talking about the various things in the spoilers reminded me of some other non-spoilery thoughts. So I'm kind of going about this in slightly the wrong order, but never mind. Yeah, overall, I think the characters are very well observed, which is a big draw for me. The plot is put together very cleverly. I'm very intrigued to find out what's going to happen in the second half. Brady and Hodges are both a bundle of stereotypes, but that doesn't mean that they're not engaging characters. They're very well done stereotypes, if I'm being honest. So King, he knows how to tell a story. I mean, say what you want about his books. I haven't really read much of them, and I'm probably not planning to read very many more. But I have put the audiobook of the second in the Bill Hodges series on my wish list. And whether or not I move on to that, I think is going to depend on how unpleasant things get in the second half, because I could see this, going quite dark. I mean, yes, check the content warnings before going into this book. It's a Stephen King book. You know there are going to be content warnings. So just, I would look them up, definitely. It's not bothering me too much as yet, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, Brady is a fairly stereotypical psychopath. His the language, I would say, overall feels a bit dated. I mean, this book came out in 2014, which is over 10 years ago now, but still, Stephen King obviously not bothered about being politically correct, and it shows. Brady's narrative in particular, his narrative voice is wildly offensive, but deliberately so, and his relationship with his mother is uncomfortably inappropriate, but also deliberately so, and it's all very effective. So yeah, enjoying it. In terms of diversity so far, there is some interesting points to make. There's one queer character. Brady has a lesbian co-worker, Freddie, who he interacts with occasionally. And what I find particularly interesting is that in Brady's thoughts, he is really disparaging and really offensive about pretty much everybody except Freddie. So that's interesting. Obviously, a deliberate choice on King's part there. Don't know what it means, but I found it interesting. As I said, Janie is probably the only main female character in it, but she is awesome. Love her. She's probably my favorite character with Jerome. Jerome is also an awesome character, and he is pretty much the only non-white character, but he is great. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna very sort of eagerly, but also a bit terrifyingly move on to the second half and see where we end up. And I will come back and let you know my thoughts when I finish the book. But yeah, surprisingly good so far. So I am back, having finished the second half of Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King, and wow, what a ride. I really wasn't expecting to enjoy this book as much as I did, shall we say. There were some pretty unpleasant aspects in the second half. The tension over the incident that I was expecting to happen around the halfway mark was pretty well dragged out until the reveal on that came through, and then it actually went awry in a very unexpected and pretty grim fashion. There was also a very long flashback to Brady's childhood, which was maybe a bit too long and pretty depressing and quite unpleasant as well. But it never kind of tipped over the edge of what I was happy to be listening to. Yeah, I saw some doom coming, which then did very much happen shortly afterwards. And perhaps I kind of half remembered it from last time, but I don't really have much of a memory of this book, as is usually the case with these books. There was a new character who kind of came into it more in the second half, which is Janie's cousin Holly. And she was another really great, very layered, complex female character. She has fairly significant mental health issues that make her behave in quite an awkward fashion. But I think she was very well presented. She had a really great arc, and the found family vibes between her and Jerome and Hodges were great and actually had me tearing up at various points. Tension really ramps up towards the end. I was deliberately going out for extra walks just to listen to more of the book, which is great for me because I need a lot of exercise to keep my diabetes under control. So thank you, Stephen King, I guess, for keeping me healthy. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It was great. I didn't remember what happened at the end. It got very exciting. It was very satisfying in terms of how it all worked out. I did think there was a very amusing bit, quite a burn on Lee Child, because he has Brady reading a Lee Child book when he's on a job at one point and he's waiting for his client to come back. So that was quite amusing. Yeah, really enjoyed it. I guess most of the rest of the stuff that I might say would probably be in the spoilers, so probably go into the spoiler section now. Move on to where the frame disappears if you don't want spoilers for the second half of Mr. Mercedes. Yeah, the dog is fine. The dog is fine. The dog does not get poisoned. Doesn't happen, because what actually happens is that Brady's mother finds the poisoned hamburger meat and eats it, and he comes home and she is dying of strychnine poisoning, which is really quite grim. That is probably the most grim part of the book, because he doesn't do anything about it and it goes on for quite a while, and she does in fact die. So he kills his mother by accident instead of the dog. And I have to admit, I mean, I think this is probably the case for most people reading books. I preferred that to have happened than for the dog to have died. I mean, yes, Brady's mother is a pretty terrible person. In the extended flashback, we do discover that she and Brady pretty much worked together to kill his 3-year-old brother, who had been brain damaged by choking on a piece of apple, and had his oxygen was so restricted to his brain that though he survived, he was quite badly altered by it. And yeah, they basically, Brady pushed him down the stairs and he broke his neck but was still alive, and then the mother suffocated him. So that was pretty horrible too. So yeah, she wasn't a great person. I mean, she probably didn't deserve to die in such a horrible way, but I was happy that it was her and not the dog, is all I will say. Brady plans to go out with a bang, quite literally, by blowing up a concert which is happening in the town in a few days' time. One of the things that I really liked about the second half was that his mental state and attitude to things changed quite dramatically once he decided to do that. And I thought that was really realistic, because suddenly he knew he was going to die, or thought he was going to die. And so he stopped worrying about how he was going to dispose of his mother's body, or he didn't turn up to work because he didn't need to hold down a job anymore, and he didn't need to worry about money or any of the consequences of his actions, because he thought he was going to die. And I thought that was very effective. I also thought that Hodges wasn't going to die, because he has a heart attack during the climax, and if I hadn't known that this was the first in a trilogy about this specific character, then I would have assumed that he wasn't going to make it till the end. Yeah, Holly and Jerome and Hodges work it all out, and they stop Brady at the concert. I was cheering inside when Holly bashed him over the head with a weighted sock. Yeah, I thought that was great, but it didn't shy away from the consequences of that, and it talks about her having nightmares and needing additional therapy, so that was also good. Yeah, really enjoyed it. I don't know what else to say, really. So, like, end of spoilers. So yes, massive surprise for me. I guess the next thing to do is to go back to my review from whenever I read it before and see what that says. So here we go. It was 2018, so I was right. I was almost exactly right. 2018, September 2018. Mr. Mercedes is the first in a trilogy by Stephen King about retired police detective Bill Hodges. I've never read any Stephen King before, but this audiobook was narrated by a particular favourite narrator of mine, so I decided to give it a go. There's nothing supernatural about this story, though it has its rather grim elements. I liked all the characters on the good guy's side, and the insight into the bad guy's motivations was chillingly portrayed. it went too far for me towards the end, but by then I couldn't leave it unfinished as I needed the bad guy to be stopped. So I carried on, and I was glad I did because of spoilers. So I'm not going to read the end of that. But yeah, so fairly similar reaction. I don't know what it means by it went too far for me towards the end, because I think the most unpleasant bits were pretty much in the middle. So yeah, I don't know what I meant about that. Obviously didn't carry on with the series the first time around, but I'm definitely planning to now. Yeah, Mr. King really knows how to tell a story, and Mr. Patton really knows how to narrate it. So it was an excellent combination of author and narrator as far as I'm concerned, and I've got Finders Keepers Book 2 in my audio library already, and maybe carrying on with that fairly soon. So yeah, enjoyed it. 4.5 stars I am giving this book. Never thought I would say that about a Stephen King novel, so I am glad to be wrong in this instance. So yeah, that's about it for this episode of Reviews Revisited. Next time around, I am going to be reading An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. Largely because I have discovered that the sequel is now available, so I can then move on to read that, and it is a duology, so that will finish off a series for me, and also be quite handy because I need a duology for the new Herkyard hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, which I am now taking part in because I can't seem to stop making life more complicated for myself. So that's going to help me out with that challenge. So yes, Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard next month. I hope you will join me for that, and that you have enjoyed this instalment of Reviews Revisited as much as I have. Bye for now.